And welcome to our webinar today. I'm Trudy Hart and I'll be moderating our next hour together. Today we're going to be discussing how NSPB and NSAW give your teams access to faster planning, sharper insights and AI-powered forecasting, so you can make decisions at the speed your business now demands of you. Before we get started, just a quick bit of housekeeping. I'll give everybody a moment to read the disclaimer we've got on the screen. Really the intent, just make sure that you're doing your own independent research when making any buying decisions. So we will be recording today's session and we'll share the recording and the presentation slides with you all afterwards. On the right-hand side of your Demio screen, you should see the chat panel. Please drop questions in at any point. We'll be keeping an eye on them and we've allowed for 10 minutes at the end to cover off the questions. Also, you'll notice on the right-hand side, there is a polls tab. To help keep things interactive today, we will be running a couple of polls as well. So as they pop up, pop in your answers and you'll see the results of those polls in real time. We're going to test a poll now, so that should be popping up in a moment. There we go. So are you currently using NetSuite? Excellent. It's quite good watching the percentages go up. So it looks like 75% of you are all using NetSuite. So we've got a few people maybe interested in looking at moving to NetSuite as well. All right. So with all of the housekeeping out the way, let's get started. I'm going to pass over to Tony Field. Tony is NetSuite's General Manager of Channels and Ecosystems for ANZ. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, Trudy. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for taking the time out of your day today to attend this session. I'm going to kick things off a little bit different, and I'm going to talk about Oracle in sport. Some of you will know that Oracle sponsors the Red Bull Formula One racing team. If you're a sailing fan, you'll know about SailGP. And if you're a soccer fan, you'd know about the English Premier League. But behind that branding, there's something much more interesting going on. And it's elite teams using Oracle apps, data and cloud technology to change how they compete. Did you know that in Formula One, Oracle Red Bull Racing runs about 8 billion race simulations per weekend to decide strategy, tyre choice, pit windows, fuel, attack or defend, all powered by Oracle Cloud. The car is basically a rolling data center, pushing out hundreds of sensor channels and up to 150,000 data points per second into Oracle Analytics platform. When it comes to the SailGP, did you know each SailGP boat runs with roughly 800 sensors, streaming 240,000 data points every second, all processed by Oracle Cloud in under 200 milliseconds. Across a typical SailGP race day, Oracle infrastructure helps process tens of billions of data points and requests, from telemetry to video and fan data. And finally, did you know that in the English Premier League, Oracle Cloud is helping crunch 3 decades of football data, heading towards 3 petabytes and running up to 100,000 live match simulations to power win probability and momentum stats that fans now see on the screen in real time. So what's the common thread? In every one of these examples, 3 things are happening. Data from lots of different sources is being pulled together quickly. That data is turned into predictions and scenarios, not just static reports. And decisions are made fast enough that they actually change what happens on the field, on the track, or in the stadium. Now bring that thinking back to business and to NetSuite. NetSuite Planning and Budgeting, part of the EPM suite, is essentially the strategy room for your organization. In sport, that's the room where coaches and analysts run through what-if scenarios. What if the wind shifts? What if we pit early? What if we press high instead of sitting deep? In business, your version of those questions could be what if demand spikes? What if costs jump? What if we open a new region or channel? NetSuite Analytics Warehouse, or Oracle Analytics Cloud, then plays the role of the performance and analysis hub. In sport, that's where all the GPS data, video, medical and performance stats gets combined so the coaches can see the full picture. In your world, it's where you bring together financials, sales, operations, customer data, and external sources into one place. So you can actually see the full picture of performance, not just a narrow slice. So Analytics Warehouse helps you understand what is really happening and why. Planning and budgeting uses those insights to update plans, forecasts, and scenarios. NetSuite itself is where you execute, where orders, projects, inventory, and billing all live, just like the field of play where the game is actually decided. So Oracle's work with sporting organizations is essentially about making that continuous improvement cycle possible. Collect, analyze, decide, act, and repeat. That's exactly the pattern we adopt with NetSuite. So when you see Oracle on a sale or at a racetrack, it's a reminder that competitive edge now lives at that intersection of technology, data, and decision-making. So with that, I hope you learned just a little bit about Oracle in sport, and I'm going to hand back to Trudy. It's going to be a very interesting session covering AI with NetSuite Analytics Warehouse and planning and budgeting. Thank you. Back to you, Trudy.
Thanks, Tony. Don't know if my head could quite comprehend some of those numbers. Super interesting. So everyone, today's webinar is an encore presentation of a couple of in-person events we ran recently, and you will notice there is an F1 theme throughout. So look out for the car analogies. So super quick intro to me. I'm Trudy. I lead the EPM sales here at Pivot2. My background, though, is actually finance. So I had 20 years in various industry and in various roles, and I've sat in many of the seats that you're all sitting in today. These days, I get to work with CFOs and finance leaders who are looking to modernize systems and processes. And just quickly, if you're not familiar with the term EPM, it stands for Enterprise Performance Management. Think of EPM as the CFO's control tower. EPM takes everything that happens after your core NetSuite ERP is closed. Everything from account reconciliations, board management reporting, and of course, planning and budgeting. I'm delighted to be joined by Peter Nitschke. Peter is one of Pivot2's founding partners. Pete spends his time designing forecasting and analytics models for NetSuite customers, and he really enjoys pushing AI into the parts of finance that it needs the most. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Pete's showing us today. We also are joined by Ray Haynes. Ray is Pivot2's Director of Data and Analytics based in Sydney. Ray helps customers throughout the ANZ region take their projects from ideation and business case to dashboard deployment and business impact. And with that, I'll hand over to you. Thanks, Ray.
Thanks, Trudy. Hello, everyone. The goal of my session today is to get you thinking about how your business is leveraging data to optimize performance and what obstacles may be impeding your progress. So continuing with our competitive sports and F1 analogies, let's take an analytics fitness level self-assessment. In a moment, we're going to start a self-assessment poll, which has 10 statements about data and analytics related to your business. You'll then rate each statement on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 indicating the statement does not describe your business, with 5 indicating the statement highly describes your business. All right, let's walk through this together. As I read each statement, please enter your responses to the poll question on the right-hand side of your browser. As we go along, you'll see a summary of everyone's responses. However, you'll need to keep track of your own responses to total your score at the end. So let's get started. Number 1, our NetSuite engine is highly tuned with custom fields, records, and workflows. Looks like we have half the responses. Mostly describes. That looks good. Okay, we could probably move on to the next question. All right. Number 2, we easily get insights from native NetSuite saved searches and reports. A lot of twos, some threes coming in. Thanks for sharing your thoughts, everyone. We'll give it a few more seconds. All right, number 3. Our organization has clear, well-defined departmental KPIs.
Well, I think you jumped over one there, right?
Oh, sorry.
Data quality is excellent and trustworthy. I think.
There you go. Look, I got excited. Our data quality is excellent and trustworthy across all sources. Thanks for keeping me honest there, Pete.
With that one, we'll definitely be interested if anyone marks the 5. That's us exactly, because we'll come and find out your secrets. You know, that's a tricky one.
Number 4, our organization has clear, well-defined departmental KPIs. I guess that was the one I was excited about. All right. Number 5, we can easily blend data from cross-functional insights, i.e. finance, sales, inventory, marketing, e-commerce. I think the key comment there in my mind is easily blend. All right, number 6, all departments have self-service access to current and historical data they need to perform their jobs. Everyone's snappy on the polls. That's great. Number 7, our reporting is automated, consistent, and delivered with speed and precision. All right, number 8, our strategic decisions are consistently backed by data, not just gut feel. Ah, good to see some 4s, even a 5, excellent. Good stuff. Number 9, we are actively using AI and ML to explain trends or predict future outcomes. All right, and last but not least, our team can answer complex ad hoc business questions from leadership with incredible speed and agility. Give a few more seconds for responses there. And I guess as we're waiting for these last responses, go ahead and tally up your individual responses if you haven't done so already. And so whether you're keeping track of the number of 2 or 3 or 4 responses you gave or the total score, either way it'll work. I think we're probably ready to close that out. And then I'll respond. Sorry, I'll move to the next slide. All right, let's see how everyone did there. So if your total score ranged from 10 to 22, or you mostly responded with 1s and 2s, you fit the garage hobbyist profile. If your total score ranged from 23 to 37, or you mostly responded with a 3, you fit the amateur circuit driver profile. And finally, if your total score ranged from 38 to 50, or you mostly responded with 5s, maybe some 4s, then congratulations, you fit the F1 front runner profile, and trust me, you are in rare air. When we conduct a similar but more detailed assessment with customers, most businesses score somewhere between a 25 to 35. And while this sports and racing analogy is fun, what does it really mean? Let's have a bit of a closer look here. What it means is if you don't fit the front runner profile yet, that's okay. Analytics capability and performance in your business, it's like any sports team, it's on a continuum. So think about a race team for a moment. You could have a driver with natural skills, but they don't have the years of experience yet, or a newly designed car that has the most amazing engine, but they're working through traction issues with the brakes. Similarly, winning finance teams are also constantly optimizing. And when you think about cross-functional capability, finance may have predictive analytics ability, while the sales team has diagnostic analysis capabilities, and while your support team only have descriptive analytics, hindsight. And so it can vary in different parts of the business, can be at different points on the continuum. Also note that the analytics continuum isn't sequential. So when we talk about machine learning and artificial intelligence, they offer an opportunity to potentially skip levels to accelerate performance improvement. Let's do one more exercise. As you think about where your organization is on its data and analytics journey, what are some of the challenges you see within your business? What blockers do you have that are preventing you from leveraging more advanced analytics? Now, we don't have a poll for this, but just take a moment and have a think about this and maybe jot a few responses down. Here are some common challenges we often hear from customers, and I'm curious to know if you are thinking of some of these same challenges. If you have a challenge that is top of mind, pop it in the chat window now. I think it would be interesting to share with others. And as you think about it, you may find that a number of these challenges are connected. So for example, an inability to combine NetSuite data from different sources often prevents self-service capability, which leads to exports and manual process, and as a result, a high effort to generate the final report or dashboard or spreadsheet or presentation. In our experience, addressing one issue tends to solve or reduce friction on several others. So let me just take a moment and see if anyone's popped in anything in the chat. Lack of resources, particularly time and staffing. Thanks for sharing that. Yep, feel free to share more. But yeah, these are common challenges or challenges to progress. And where there are challenges, though, there are opportunities. And luckily, NetSuite offers a solution that improves analytics capabilities and organizational performance. Hopefully by now, you've heard of NetSuite Analytics Warehouse, or NSAW. NSAW is designed to address many of the challenges mentioned, with pre-built integration into NetSuite, hundreds of pre-built visualizations and dashboards. It's essentially a data warehouse in a box and a hell of a time to value accelerator. There are several common business drivers we've heard from customers that have implemented NSAW, including the need to combine NetSuite data with other data, whether that be internal business systems or external industry data, the need to securely share NetSuite data and analysis with non-NetSuite users, the need for self-service reports, workbooks, dashboards, and ad hoc analysis, or the need to address performance issues with long-running NetSuite safe searches, reports, or dashboards, particularly with complex calculations or aggregated transactional data. Also, the need for historical snapshots for true time series analysis of transactions. And finally, the need for a cost-effective modern data and analytics solution with a predictable cost for budgeting purposes. In other words, a solution that doesn't have a usage meter running for every part of the tool, which usually translates to the more you use it, the more it costs. So can NSAW help your organization? If one or more of these drivers applies to your business, then it may be worth taking a closer look at NSAW. NSAW may be able to help you progress on the analytics continuum we saw earlier and ultimately help to improve performance of the business. That's it for me. If you have any questions, please post them in the chat and we can discuss them during the Q&A session at the end. For now, thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Trudy. And you're on mute, Trudy.
I am on mute. Thanks for that, Ray. I can see a couple of good questions coming in, so I look forward to asking you those at the end, Ray. We're going to shift focus now, everyone, and talk about planning and budgeting. And sticking with the car theme, NetSuite Planning and Budgeting, or NSPB, is the engine that supports your FP&A teams. Before I pass over to Pete, though, let's take a moment and think about your current planning, budgeting, and reporting processes. So we've surveyed more than 50 organisations over the last 12 months or so, and these 15 challenges are the common ones that we see consistently rising to the top. So I'm curious how many resonate with each of you today. And again, we should have another poll appearing in your window in a moment. There we go. So have a scan through, see how many are familiar. All of them? I hope not. None of them would be amazing. We've got sums and mosts coming in.
Once again, if it's none, we'll be calling you directly and finding out the secrets, because I think every organization has some of these challenges at some times.
I think my favorite one is number 10, finding formula errors. I remember 7 nights in a row of 4 a.m. in the morning trying to solve 3-way models in Excel and realizing there was a formula error. So that one is definitely top for me. All right. So the reason these challenges are so common, it's simple. Most FP&A teams are being asked to run a modern business on processes and tools that were never really designed for today's speed. So, question, what do you think? Are you being driving, or are you being dragged through your FP&A process? A lot of people will say they're managing just fine, and then budget season will hit them. The board wants a mid-quarter reforecast, and suddenly the process actually becomes a bottleneck instead of a reliable engine it should be. And we can see here on the left-hand side, we've got a horse and cart and a bike. That's where we find most organizations that we're talking to: manual spreadsheets, version chaos, late changes, and a forecast or a budget that no one really trusts. For sure, teams are doing their absolute best, but the tools just can't keep up. As you move right, we're getting smoother, faster, more reliable. And by the time you're in the F1 car, your FP&A processes are a strategic asset to your business and not something that you just feel like you're trying to survive through. So keep in mind which vehicle feels closest to your reality. And I'm going to pass over to Pete now, and let's have a look at exactly how NSPB helps teams move from a horse and cart towards a truly modern, high-performing FP&A engine.
Brilliant. Thanks, Trudy. So as we kind of start working through and start, identifying kind of core issues that are there, it really is worthwhile to kind of tick back and go, right, what does a modern FP&A team require in order to, be their best selves and not be at 4 a.m. fixing Excel errors? I think these are kind of the core things that we talk to, right? It's a source of truth for numbers, right? It's one spot that we can look at, that we're comfortable that the budget is the budget and it's not going to change in the middle of the year. We talk a lot about integrated tools, and a lot of that is really related to trying to elevate the processes of budgeting and forecasting up and outside the 1 or 2 people that may be looking at the budget models, that may be owning and working kind of that budget spreadsheet. Obviously, we've seen over the years a lot of very complicated and very quite good and clean Excel files. But the reality is, if it's really only owned and understood by 1 or 2 people, there's a risk, a usage risk on that. There's obviously overload of that. And then those people generally have a rough budget and forecast window when they're trying to do a lot of their work. one of the other kind of components, and it's really that step up from there, is that by using tools that have things like cell level security and all of those processes, you can actually extend components like workforce, where I can now have a good sense of control. My managers have access to the payroll information for their teams, but I'm not emailing around payroll files across the entire organization. Continuous forecasting, I think, COVID was the shock for a lot of people, particularly in Australia, where all of a sudden in the middle of the year, the middle of the financial year, the budgets that we had were useless, right? Like they were not going to reflect what the reality was going to look like. So a lot of that shift towards the continuous forecasting kind of model, whether that's quarterly, whether that's monthly, whether that's weekly rolling forecasting, I think there really is a shift to not just relying on annual budgeting. With that then, and this is really the framework that I'm going to talk to today, it's looking at the tooling for driver-based decision-making, trying to use some ML, trying to use some AI, trying to bring all of that information together, but actually making that available and have them be tools that all the members of the team can actually use. What we don't want when we ever talk about, putting more complexity in a system, that then you've got a black box where the numbers come out, because then you still don't own it. I talk a lot when I talk to new clients about budgeting. Budgeting is not ever just coming up with the best number. It's coming up with the best number that someone can own. It's kind of what we're going to be talking through today. All right. We're going to start nice and simple and clean. We're going to talk about things that are platform features within an NSPB that are aligned, that are repeatable, that are nice, they're standard, they're very clean, they're very extensible. Really simply, executive ready reporting. This is kind of one of those ones where a lot of tools have this. Key benefit here is this data is all live. So as the forecasts are updating at any point, we can come in, we can have a look at our dashboards, we can see our integrated tooling of balance sheet cash flow running as people are updating the P&L data. Executive ready reporting, it's a similar vein. It's now opening up reports that are both pretty and clean and available in Excel, available in PDF. They can be automatically distributed either on a schedule or on demand and pushed out across the broader organization. You can have charts on them. They can have drill through to underlying transactional information. You can brand them. You can set them up really the way that you need them to be and really push out a lot of that information kind of more broadly across the organization, not just sitting kind of the finance FP&A kind of group. Trend planning. It's simple and easy to use, but fundamentally it's incredibly powerful for those non-driver cost components, things that are reasonably standard over time, but we can add in really simple escalations or de-escalations. We can apply seasonality or ignore seasonality. We can use 3, 6, 12-month averages. So an uptick in costs is actually being modeled, and it's not just, oh, last year, but now we've spent more than we expected. So a lot of that then dovetails into how we want to do forecasting and how we want to really enable ourselves to do monthly or quarterly forecasting much faster. Driver planning is then that kind of next step up. So this is really where we start to see operational revenue planning or expense planning for COGS. But the core benefits here is it's not just forecasting, it's also then back calculating through for our actuals. So we can see all of our historical rates. We've forecast X dollars, it's actually Y dollars. And that then extends all the way into detailed variance analysis. It's now not just actual versus budget, it's price volume efficiency reporting. It's looking at what price variations have occurred, how much volume has impacted our scope. If you've got FX, that can start to be brought in to the model. And then, efficiency across the board. Once again, not also at an individual low level, it also works further up the chain. So it can start to look at more consolidated data across the broader thing. So you can start doing comparisons across your product lines, for instance. And now we'll get into a little bit more of the AI fun things. I'm going to start, this is actually something that's been available for a very long time in the tool, and probably in my mind, a bit of an underused feature, but this is on-the-fly predictions on a form. So any form that you have, if it's got statistics, it does need to have some history, it does need to have a bit of information on it, but you can run a prediction over that data and get a sense check. It's incredibly useful to show, right, I've got a forecast in there. How does that actually align with, best case, worst case? It will provide the information to you. But you can also do things like it has a bulk copy feature. So if you're really quickly trying to do a best case or a worst case model, you can start with your base version and then just bulk upload into a best case version and rerun the sensitivities. So incredibly powerful tool, all directly on that kind of simple form design that's set up. But now we get into the more advanced features. And this is really where the direction that I suppose the industry as a whole is going, but also more fundamentally, the direction that Oracle is going. And the key benefits that Oracle are bringing to the table in this regard are probably two. Firstly, they've got a platform where they've got a lot of other tools, and we're going to look at some of these things where they're bringing their own internal AI and machine learning tools that already exist on the Oracle platform. And they're simply exposing the NSPB data to that and allowing it to basically feed backwards and forwards. But I don't need to know and understand how the machine learning model, I don't have to go and enable it somewhere else and check a box and spin up an OCI server. It's all available on the platform all the way up and down. The second thing, and probably one of the more important ones, I think, as we start really progressing at pace to this kind of new AI-led world, Oracle has really lent into the fact that we want to have an entire stack and we want to have all that data, because we can't really see how we can effectively put our hand on our heart and say that we are fully supporting the security framework if all of a sudden we're dumping data out to a third party. We're copying financials out to ChatGPT. Are we actually confident that that data is secure? And I think by putting it all back into the underlying platform, they're really trying to support both the advanced kind of features that everyone's demanding in the industry, but also really doing it in a way that is sustainable and appropriate for businesses. So I'll touch on one of the first ones, which is insights analysis. This is really an insights toolkit that's available for live over your data to kind of do automated analysis at scale. So once this is set up, this runs continuously over the data in the background and provides a really detailed set of reports and analysis that can then be exposed to your like business analytics team to actually go through kind of level by level. You'll see here in the screenshot, we've got priorities, we've got impacts, we've got value. But then for each of these items, we can then drill in and actually see a lot more detailed information related specifically to that item. So this is jumping into one of the specific ones. This is looking at historical actual data and identifying in historical actual data as it's fed out of NetSuite into the system, hey, this data point doesn't look right. We can see here, even just looking at this data, there must have been a non-reversing journal that's gone through, or a massive credit that's gone through, but it doesn't fit the rest of the data that's there. Obviously, an analyst could probably find that. They could spend a lot of time, they could go down to each individual intersection and find those weird ones and go and check it. Here, we're now actually just having the tool do that for us, providing the kind of the insights and the view of that data, providing both a chart, which is an incredibly useful way of kind of actually analyzing any of this information, but also providing that generative AI commentary, explaining why the system thinks it's wrong, why the system thinks it's weird, why it's an anomaly. And that's just runs in the background as well. But then we can also use the workflow tool to then take it that next step. So is this an issue? I can send it to someone, they'll get a notification saying, hey, can we have a look at this data point? Obviously here we're probably running a little bit late to deal with it. But if you think about it in the context of, as I'm working through my month-end cycle, I'm starting to get notifications of these things such that we don't end up in a situation where at the end of the month-end cycle, all of a sudden we realize that we didn't post these three accruals and we're actually understated, and now we've got to either open the month again or fix it. So it's really trying to help the business analysts identify and drill into that information quickly at scale and kind of give them context all the way through it. It's not just for actuals though, and this is probably now the next step. Because we've got access to all of our actual historical data and all of our forecast data, it can now start to do analysis of our forecasts to say, are we forecasting things correctly? This is an incredibly useful feature for stuff like exactly this one, operations and maintenance, which is a very difficult item to forecast at scale, because if you're doing the 80% preventative maintenance, the 20% reactive maintenance, it's nice and stable, but if all of a sudden that's 50-50, your costs can start ballooning in one direction or go the other way. The one thing I will say with this is that it actually provides comfort, not only that we're doing the right thing, we haven't fat-fingered $1 million when we meant to write $10,000, but it also provides that sense check throughout the entire kind of data. I mean, even within, well-run organizations, often we have seen when budgets are getting finalized, there's two errors that have managed to kind of reverse each other out, so no one really notices. And then you get into the quarter, you start doing the reporting, and all of a sudden it's like, well, do we fix this or do we not fix this? Because the top line numbers can't change, and it starts becoming very fiddly to identify what that is. So having that kind of sense check live over your forecast as well for, is this an anomaly? Is someone sandbagging their budget because they want to ensure that they've got money but they're actually not spending it? Or is someone really understating where they're going to be and there actually is a problem that's starting to evolve over the year? Is an incredibly powerful kind of feature. Similarly here, this generative AI insights provides that little bit of capability to kind of show and explain, in both numbers and a chart as to kind of where the issue is. That's there. All right. Moving on to the next, and this is now the most recently released feature kind of in the Oracle kind of advanced analytics kind of framework and stack. It's multivariate modeling. So this really got announced a couple of months ago, was added into NSPB and announced kind of at SuiteWorld. That's there. And really this is taking the next step up from what is just the trending and the drivers and all of the other kind of features that we kind of looked at earlier on. So in this framework, we're now starting to look at not only just a linear regression trend or a driver, we're now starting to overlay machine learning technology, which allows us to bring together multiple statistics and multiple drivers into a single framework. Once again, the core benefit of this, or at a technical layer, what's here, is that this is Oracle taking their own internal machine learning framework that they've been building in the background and overlaying it directly over the NSPB data without us needing to go and spin up that model separately. Key benefits here really is we've now got the capability to blend multiple different drivers together. We can use machine learning tools to clean up our data. We can provide sensitivity analysis, explain the outputs in real time as we're getting them. Obviously, with anything like this, it works best with more data. The minimum is generally, a 2-for-1. We'd want 2 years of data for every 1 year we want to do. But the more data that we have, if we've got 3 or 4 or 5 years of history, we can get better outcomes because it's dealing with a little bit more of the sensitivities and the modeling that's underpinning that. I'm going to show a little bit of the, in my original one, I was going to say the sausage is made, but Trudy pointed out that this is kind of like lifting the hood of an F1 car, which even if you know what a normal car looks like, lifting the hood of an F1 car is a completely different tool. But I did want to kind of start showing some of the questions and things that we need to start kind of thinking about if we want to go down this path of using the more comprehensive multivariate analysis. The key here is, as we work through the data sets that we want to forecast, and let's say in this context, we're forecasting the number of hours of training that we want to do, we're capturing core bits of information from either internal sources, so things like marketing spend, marketing promotions, number of simulators, etc., as well as external factors. So here we've got global GDP, the number of commercial flights, infrastructure investment in different areas. So blending both our own internal data as well as external data that we may be getting from kind of aggregated data sources, etc., and bringing that in. If I'm a retailer, it would be looking at things like rebates, marketing spend, advertising click-through ratios. So as Ray was kind of alluding to earlier on, looking at things like using NSAW to bring all of that data into a single platform that we can then ingest it into NSPB. So I've got my CRM data automatically pushing through. Manufacturing would be things like product mix, so down to the individual SKUs, order backlogs, order frequency, basket size, etc. And even things like, what is the cannibalization of my own SKU, and how does that start impacting my the volumes of sales that I'm doing? Services, kind of SaaS products or services like we use, it's churn, it's length of time, it's pipeline, it's all of that information, the conversion ratios that we're trying to track, because obviously we're trying to predict, our project conversions, how long those things are taking are incredibly important pieces of data to bring in here and kind of drive and push through. The last thing I'll mention is there are additional tools that are available here, and you can kind of start to see some of the fields here of missing values and outliers to help you deal with bad data. So really the intention here is that if you've got an outlier and I've now got really detailed data, it might be at a SKU level, rather than having an outlier of negative revenue because of one weird invoice impacting the output, we can start to replace some of that data such that we're getting good outputs based upon the general data sense. It's not perfect. Obviously, using bad data is bad data. Everyone knows that, truism when it comes to forecasting. But it does allow us to be a little bit more creative around the data sets that we want to bring in. So if we've only got data that's available quarterly, for instance, we can bring that information in and make it available. All right. We can also manage events. And this is really now where we're starting to kind of drive into the deep flexibility of the system. So I can have global events, so things like COVID, how long it impacted, what I'm trying to align it for. Or I can have my sales. So I may have an annual end of financial year sale that runs in June and it runs every year. Or I may have a once-off kind of sale. And it's really by going through identifying in my business what I feel the events are, I can then say, right, do I want to include or exclude them? I can start normalizing my own data set in real time by adding events to it to try to manage it, rather than the system going, well, you had a good sale last year, you're not going to do it this year, but we're going to pretend that you are. So you can start normalizing that and really impacting how that data is kind of pushed through. Once all that's done, then, and this is really probably the critical component, it's then starting to generate some data for you, but rather than just generating kind of bulk data, it's now providing the ability to explain how it's come up with that. So every data point that is generated has this context menu available to it to explain the prediction. And really the detail here is, and the chart is the best thing, it talks through what it thinks its accuracy is, what it thinks its error kind of gap is, etc. If it has said, if there's a lot of outliers that it's had to deal with, it will start flagging that. But the chart down the bottom is really the interesting story. It hasn't just got the actuals and then just driven put a line on it going forward. Instead, the orange line is our actuals, the kind of lilac purple is our prediction. But that light blue line, the dashed blue line that's there, that's in data science world, what's called a back test. And what that's doing is that's saying, right, well, based upon the model, this is what the model would have forecast for that month. It would have said that this is the data points that's there. So you can see here, we have got a little bit of a gap. There was an uptick in sales that wasn't potentially modeled, but then it has caught up and rolled forward. So you're really allowing the system to generate numbers, but then having the level of confidence that the system is utilizing the right driver and it's using the right seasonality, it's using the right sensitivities of the drivers that you've kind of selected. That allows you to start trimming back those drivers or extending those drivers if you're trying to capture more information. So the intent really is that iterative framework of driving the data, moving forward over time, having the system learn every month with the new data that you've got in the framework, but then also providing that kind of explanation to you in real time to get comfort of it. And if for one reason or another it can't forecast it, great. I can now ignore this one and I know that I'm going to have to go back and start doing it manually. But what we're really starting to explore with some of our customers is going, right, are there areas of the business where for this section of the business, we might start turning on this component for these GLs. So starting with some simple proof of concepts to kind of drive for best behavior, see what the outputs are, start doing those tests, and then work out where we want to start extending it. So some really, really exciting things coming up. The last thing I think that I want to talk to, and kind of the closing out of all of this, obviously I've gone through a lot of incredibly technical, detailed kind of slides and processes and so on. So hopefully that's quite exciting. But it's also really worth kind of reflecting on the journey that we might need to get there. And the way we think about these implementations, the way we think about kind of the client journey that we're trying to kind of take you guys on, for those that are kind of putting in NSPB, it really is starting to go, right, where are my core things that I'm going to get the most benefit from? Getting insights and reporting done, starting with that kind of base level forecasting, getting people in the system and using it, driver planning, sales SKUs. And all of this is really trying to build up the data reservoir that we have, build up the internal skill sets that we have, such that as we get to that point, we've got the data available, we've got the users skilled to a level where they trust the system, that then we can just start turning on the AI and ML and really getting the benefit from it. But not throwing a tsunami of complicated systems on you all on day one and saying, you know, knock yourself out, let us know if you've got any problems, because that's, I think, not a sustainable solution. All right. I think we're now going to the Q&A. Hopefully we've got some exciting and tricky questions that have come through.
Sure have. Thanks, Pete. I'm just going to go back to one of the NSAW questions that came up earlier when you were presenting, Ray. So the question is, do NSAW users also have to have a NetSuite ERP license?
Right. The short answer is no. So typically one of the use cases with NSAW is you actually want to share NetSuite data. And also if you've brought on non-NetSuite data into NSAW, you want to share it with a broader team than just, you know, let's say the finance users that are using NetSuite every day, all day. We've got a customer and implementation we did recently where they wanted to make some information available to the CEO. And the CEO is not a NetSuite user, doesn't have a NetSuite license, and the CEO only needed an NSAW license. Yeah, very common.
Nice one. Other question for you, Ray. What other data sources other than NetSuite ERP can be brought into NSAW?
Oh, wow, that's a big. The short answer here again is just about everything, and so I'll caveat that. I'll explain that. So actually going back to what Tony said to tie a couple things together, if we think about what data might you bring into NSAW, we have to take a step back and say, well, what's the technology under the covers of NSAW? And so Tony was talking about autonomous data warehouse and Oracle Analytics Cloud and you know the cloud infrastructure that Oracle provides. That's relevant for NetSuite customers because that's the underlying technology for NSAW, right? So what that means is, so there are tons of connectors available through that underlying platform that then are available to NSAW, right? So for example, it could be Salesforce or HubSpot or I don't know, there's, you know, Google Analytics, but it doesn't have to be, there doesn't have to be a pre-built connector, if that makes sense. You can also connect directly to other Oracle databases or non-Oracle databases. And it also regularly ingests flat files, right? Integrate with webhooks and APIs. So there's a ton of ways to do integrations, and it really depends on a customer's environment and kind of internal skill set and design patterns they might already have internally.
Nice one. Thanks, Ray. Hopefully that answered the question. Pete, I'm going to throw this one to you. Christine's asking, does NSPB do three-way forecasting?
Great. So yes. So the one of the modules, I think I've got it on the slide, but one of the modules that we've got is a balance sheet cash flow forecasting module. The way we think about that is effectively trying to drive down to the lowest level of information and then apply mapping assumptions to it. So for things like mapping the P&L to the balance sheet. We then apply cash timings associated to that. So that can be either 30, 60, 90 days, or potentially things that are paid quarterly. That then brings and populates the balance sheet. And then from the balance sheet, we then generate and build out a cash flow, an indirect cash flow in there. For some of our customers, we've then extended that, a few layers further. So we've got a number of retail customers that are really trying to get discrete cash flows at a weekly basis. It's generally much more direct kind of cash flow that we're looking at there. So there's a lot of flexibility in the system. But yeah, we've got some really solid templates to start from to really step that out.
Nice one. Pete, another one for you. David's asking this, and I think I've got the intent of the question right. The question is, does all of this mean we don't do forecasting anymore? And I think that it is the predictive, but we don't do forecasting anymore because the machine's going to do it all for us. Hopefully, David, I've got that right.
That definitely, I mean, that would be the no. Look, I'd say that there is always going to be a framework by which, as FP&A, we work with the business to do forecasts, to do budgets. And really fundamentally, more than anything else, all of the tooling, really no matter how it works across kind of the AI and machine learning kind of framework, it's based on the data that it knows, right? It's based on the data that you have provided it. But it doesn't know what you know that you haven't told it yet, right? That I might be opening new stores. There might be an M&A that we're doing in the background that might not be included at all. So I think there's always going to be a framework where forecasting and budgeting is something that is a business process more than a technical process. I think the piece that I'm excited about probably is, can it take off some of the grunt work of it? Can it take off and provide a 85% starting point that's really solid, that's backed by underlying kind of data points that we can look at, we can explain, and allow us to focus on the things that actually move the business and actually are business decisions that we want to make to try to drive for better profitability or better sustainability or whatever the underlying kind of business drivers there are.
Excellent. Let's see, another one here. What data sets, Pete, should we start to track to take advantage of the predictive features?
Yeah, I think this is a really exciting one. I think a lot of, if we think through, those of us that are still using kind of detailed Excel files, I think there's always been a fear of there's probably a point where we can't ingest all that data. We talk to a lot of retail clients who, they may have some sales planning that's done at SKU level, and all of a sudden it hasn't quite scaled because we're looking at spreadsheets that are 300, 400,000 lines long. And that's kind of been a challenge. So I think moving forward into kind of more the prediction and the more advanced predictions where we've got this multivariate where we're trying to track things and apply sensitivities to it, I think it is really worth sitting down and going, right, well, what do I think my business drivers are? What do I think are the fundamental things? It's sitting down with the operations managers, the sales teams, and going, right, what are the levers that we're pulling, that we're playing with, that we see impact revenues, impact kind of profitability, impact how customers are spending, impact the demand. They are the metrics that we want to start tracking in detail, and we want to start bringing into Analytics Warehouse. We want to start bringing into NSPB, and very likely a lot of those metrics are already being tracked and already being traced, and they're being traced in separate systems, or they're being tracked in Excel files, or they're being tracked in weekly KPI meetings with the sales team. So it's really going, right, well, how do we grab that information? How do we ingest that in nice and cleanly such that it's available and we can start using it for a more advanced planning and not just reporting?
Yeah, nice one.
Hey, Trudy, before you read the next question, I might just jump in as Pete was talking and actually reminded me, just talking about integration for a second. I didn't mention the obvious one, and that's NSAW integration with NSPB. So of course there's integration there, there's connectors there, and it really depends. So we've got several customers that have NetSuite, NSPB, and NSAW. And, we've got various kind of design or implementation / integration patterns. And it really depends on what's the sequence. Have they the customer implemented NetSuite and then NSPB, and then they're adding NSAW? Well, then in that scenario, if you've done some some integration and brought in data into NSPB, we'll pull that into NSAW, right? And that's a pretty easy integration point. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, if you will. Or if the customer's implemented NSAW first and then adds NSPB, that's fine too, because NSPB can pull that data from NSAW. So just thought I'd throw that out.
Yeah. And I think definitely in those circumstances, it's worth sitting down and going, right, where do I want my reporting to kind of come from? Because there will be some reporting that's really well suited for NSAW. There'll be some reporting that's really well suited for NSPB. There'll be some reporting that's really well suited just for NetSuite, which has got, you know, all that direct transactional data. So sitting down, working through what that looks like, building out a reporting catalog. And there are, you know, conversations generally that you need to have around things like licensing and who needs access to what, et cetera, that are worth kind of bringing into that. But yeah, there's a lot of flexibility and option to do, really use the best tool to drive the best outcome that you want to have for reporting, but still make it available. Because I think even, you know, there's some of the features that are in there, you can embed NSAW dashboards in NetSuite directly. So, you know, a user doesn't even need to know that it's come from NSAW because they're just in there and it's a dashboard. So a lot of that kind of direct connectivity, you don't have to expose to the user, but you still get the benefits from it.
Yeah, nice one. A good question's come up from Linda. So, Pete, if we're, you know, putting the tools in place for the FP&A teams, and again, I think, Linda, I've got the context right, with the end users for FP&A, how do you give them confidence in the numbers, you know? And I think, again, the intent is when you're using Excel, you can see it all, but with end users, how do you know, foster confidence?
I think it's a very fair question. And I think one of the ones where, you know, it's the biggest problem, because change management is always one of the biggest problems that we deal with in putting in new systems. And that's, you know, whether it's NSPB and FP&A tools or literally any other system that you're trying to put in. So I think, you know, that framework of emboldening the champions within the business, the people that have access to it, that understand really the details and the nuances, making sure that they're, you know, really feeling empowered and have access to the tools. And getting the appropriate training and so on and so forth. But then using them as a framework to kind of start helping and training other users as you're extending down is a really good way of kind of having that kind of continuity of information sharing across the organization. Obviously, there's a lot you can do at a technical level. So, you know, things like, I've got a number on an NSPB report that's actuals that doesn't look right. My next step is I double click on that and it'll take me to the underlying transactions, right? So there's a number of technical things that we can do to help provide and make sure that kind of entire end-to-end data flow is there. But I think more fundamentally, and particularly once we start talking about forecasting, and even more once we start talking about using some of the tooling, it's really going, right, well, how do we structure the training, the usability, such that people feel confident in the tool, but also then how do we actually frame up reports and analytics to kind of provide for that view. So it's really probably things like hooking together. If I'm going down a path of trying to build some best case, worst case automated scenario models, I've also got, you know, some good dashboards, some good insights checks, just to make sure that it hasn't wandered too far off the path, and that, you know, it is giving me numbers that are useful, right? I mean, it's all well and good having 5 scenarios, but if you can't use 3 of them, then you might as well not have bothered. So that drive of that is an interesting and challenging problem, and certainly one where, you know, it's worth investing the time and energy on as an organization, because I think that's where you get the value.
Nice one. I'm very aware of time. Thanks for that, Pete. And everyone today, thanks so much for joining us. It's it was a great hour. It whizzed by quickly for me. Reach out. We'd love to offer a one-on-one demo. So think of it as your own personalized tour of the showroom. There should be a final poll popping up. So if you want to catch up with us on NSAW, NSPB, or both, chuck it in the poll. We'll be in touch. Of course, mine and Ray's emails are up there as well. So thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Hope you enjoyed today's webinar.
Thanks all.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.